We are live.
Welcome to Dance
I'm told,
Party with Andrew and Chad.
yeah, I'm told we're live. Um, Hello, everybody. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Chad.
Um,
And your
Here we
beat's
are
still
again.
going.
Yeah, I mean, here we are again. This is kind of funny, though, over the airwaves. Um, Back with a thirsty, a safe thirsty, very, very safe thirsty. Um, oh, yeah, I can see it's over there. Yeah. Um, so we are actually live. I want to welcome everybody who's out there and come to watch this. I just had a couple of things I wanted to say about tonight because I know there's going to be people that come online for the questions, and it's Andrew and Chad and mixed with the masters and blah blah blah, and there's going to be a lot of questions wanting to be answered about very specific things that Andrew and I do. Um, in the studio and mix wise, which we love to answer. But on this particular evening and for this particular event that we've created, and the live ones that we do in the pubs, they're meant more to be expanding the conversation into different areas, finding out other people's interests too, and not steer away from music. I want to, our guests tonight, they have interests in music, but I think we want to find out, what they do and what they're interested in of what we do, and it's just to cross-pollinate a little bit more than just Andrew and me in the studio and what we do. There's lots of platforms, lots of great things to go look at for finding out that information. There's Pure Mix that does their videos. Mix with the Masters does videos plus the live seminars, and you can go online and find out about all those things to get more specific, you know, direction about like the kinds of stuff that we do. But be careful though, because if you go online, if you put in mix with the masters, it'll come up with a thing that says mix with
No,
masters,
not
and
anymore.
that goes to pure mix. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Because I found that was a little bit odd. I just wanted to flag that in case it was confusing for some people. Um, I'd like to thank Max and Tudor. They're sort of our I don't know, what would you call them, directors
Our
of
platform hosts are,
our
yeah,
platform
I don't know.
host.
Our buddies. How about that?
This is not actually something that's affiliated with Mixed with the Masters, it, except that they're just good friends of ours, and they offered to help us do this and make it easier for us, um, just so we could have fun talking to different people that we want to talk to. Do you have anything to
Yeah.
add to that?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, you'll get an idea of what kind of questions make sense once we start blabbing, I think. I mean, because
Yeah.
like you say, we're definitely going to talk about music, but it's more what music means to people in different disciplines. And I think, especially with Adam, someone who's changed disciplines, but I mean, he used to do
Yeah.
exactly what we do at a very high level, and now he does something totally different.
Yeah.
And Bella more as somebody who appreciates being able to listen to music even more because of what she's gone through. And so it's much more
Well,
about that than the nuts and bolts of making records. That's we do lots of that, and we will do more of that, but that's not tonight.
yeah, exactly. So let's bring them on. So we have Bella Bathurst, who wrote this book called Sound: Stories of Hearing Lost and Found. I'm sure we'll get to talk about this book. It was a book that I found very, very inspiring, and I can tell you why if anybody's interested. It helped me through kind of a rough time, which again I can explain more of that. She's written several other titles too. I haven't read all of them. I've read one other, and I've got some questions for Bella on that too. And we have Adam Samuels, who was an engineer, uh, 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 you know, had really made a career for himself as an engineer. And you can tell us who you've worked for. I'll let you. I'll wait to get into that. But some pretty heavy hitters. And he decided to, and I don't know why, haven't, but he decided. I can think about why. I kind of feel like it myself sometimes. But he decided to become an astrophysicist, which he has done. So I want to welcome both of you to our little thing
Thanks.
here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you. It's amazing.
yeah,
Well, don't
um,
don't don't say that yet.
yeah. Well,
We
we'll
don't
see
know
how
yet.
this.
We'll
Yeah,
see.
It's a potential
I
to
hope
be
every
amazing.
Yes.
I hope everybody brought their own booze, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
not
I
buying
I'm gonna work my way
tonight.
through a coffee first, and then I'll probably make it to a beer in the second hour.
Okay, all right, good. Um, well, let's get started then. Let's. I don't know. I've said this a lot in some of these thirsty things about the book Sound, um, and it's basically a autobiographical book about what you went through losing your hearing in your mid 20s, I think it was, and um, severely losing your hearing in the midst of all this work you were doing, going through all the things that I can imagine, and more things after reading the book, um, and then coming out being misdiagnosed about what the cause of it was, and spending all this time doing other things, learning other things, dealing with the emotional impact, which is where I really got inspired, from some of the things that you went through, continuing to work, pushing through all this hardship, and coming out the other side, getting re-diagnosed, having an operation which could have made things worse, and then and it seemed like it did. It was like a movie, having the operation. You're supposed to get your hearing back, and even the guy who did the operation is going, well, it should have come back by now. And it was months later, and then it started coming back, and I just I was cheering by then. This is a movie for me. It's it
Well,
was
thank you.
amazing.
I mean, it was it.
um
I guess it's one of those things that yeah, it just feels. I mean, now because I had hearing, then lost it, and then got it back, and it just feels like such a completely natural thing. But, but at the same time, I um, I've got more knowledge now and more understanding of it. So this spring particularly, I was out building a vegetable patch today, and the bird song is just insane. I mean, it's like a rainforest out there. And
yeah.
because of lockdown, and because there's less plane noise, and because there's less traffic noise, and because everything just seems to be way more vivid, either because of the lack of pollution or just because of the kind of with the state we're all in, it just feels just insanely gorgeous and vivid and you listen to the kind of different blackbird songs and all of that, but actually one of the things about lockdown and covid and the social distancing measures is it really makes you think about hearing, because one of the things with all the things we're being advised to do, keep your distance and cover your face, are all the things that are worse possible thing for anyone who's deaf or has hearing problems. Covering your face is disastrous. If I cover my mouth, you can't hear
Okay.
me half as well. So and
Or
that's
see, or
been a
see.
new normal.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to see too to read lips
Wouldn't be
or
able to lip read either. Yeah.
Absolutely,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that kind of process of thinking about sound and thinking about, but one of the things that I came across in my research was that there are two industries which really professionally screw up their subjects hearing. One is the military, because there's all those loud explosions, and the other is the music industry. And the music industry is I mean, it's almost seen as a kind of standard. Well, you know, you work in the music industry, it doesn't matter whether it's classical or rock, you expect to lose your hearing. That's just collateral damage kind of thing. And it was extraordinary during the research for the book, trying to find a musician, a kind of reasonably high level musician who would talk about hearing loss. And anecdotally, I was hearing loads and loads of people who had kind of problems and who had stuffed their hearing through years and years of playing live or mixing or whatever it was. And I could not find anyone who would talk on the record. It was just extraordinary. Yeah. And I'm sure you and Andrew, both Tchad and Andrew, both and Adam must have experience of people who just, you know, there's one thing on the inside and there's another thing on the outside kind of thing.
Well, here's the thing about that, and I'm sure Adam's got, I don't know, stories of being in the studio as well, and Andrew too. But when we first met, I remember you talking about that, because you ended up interviewing Giles Martin, but to talk about his father, George, losing his hearing, but you couldn't get anybody else to go on record, and it really is it's an overlooked and much needed conversation to open up here, because over the years I've gotten messages or talked to people at the seminars who have all said, you know, I'll never be able to do this because my hearing's kind of screwed. You know, I've got one ear that's like this, I've got this, you know, or I can't hear, and I'll never be able to mix like you. And I was saying, man, you know, my ears are totally fucked. I used to shoot guns, you know, without hearing protection. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. And
but there's a really interesting, one of the things that's really interesting is if you have an industry where everybody in it is a little bit deaf, has at least screwed most of their high range and probably half their there is a really interesting kind of thing of, are we listening to music which is made by the deaf? I don't know. I have no idea.
Wait, here's what's interesting about it is I think your hearing anomalies are going to create it's like anything else. It's those limitations that might give you an edge, actually, for a sound. You might come up with a sound that nobody's heard and people are going to like it, you know, or they don't. You know, it can go either way, I suppose. But it's not something I've after reading your book and talking to you, something that I really and we connected on this issue, and you know, about getting together and opening up that conversation for a lot of engineers, people who are starting out, to not be so worried about it, because you can overcome it. And the whole hearing thing anyway is really just a big mind game, isn't it? Like, so much you can do with mind training to, like, for tinnitus and what's hyperacusis,
hyperacusis, yeah.
Hyperacusis with the pain, and so I really love the idea of being able to maybe get people not so worried about that. Try to help that area, because
there's a lot more awareness of it now too. I think in the last 10 years, and especially the last 5, like, I don't think you could go anywhere that's a purpose-built orchestral hall in most countries and not see screens behind the heads of the people sitting in front of the brass players and things like that, which used to be, you didn't do that. But anyone sitting in front of the trumpets, they were deaf by the end of a season. And now that's in place pretty much everywhere you go. And I think it's not seen, it used to sort of be a badge of honor to not put in earplugs when you went to a concert. Oh no, I got to experience it right. And people are a little smarter about that. Sure. But it's also, if you think about, especially before you've managed to establish yourself, if you admit to not being able to hear perfectly in a situation where you're going to get paid to hear, you're never going to admit it. And then it sort of gets ingrained, and it's a very weird thing where I will gladly admit that I've got some holes in my right ear that I don't have in my left ear, and it's a little unbalanced. But it's also, it's silly to think that unless it gets catastrophic, obviously, small variations like that, your brain is immediately compensating for. because it knows something has changed. So unless you have a catastrophic damage at a specific time, your brain's going to compensate. And I don't think it necessarily changes how you hear. And I think also, just to go to a slight recording point, so we'll go a little bit this way, I think that it's a lot less about, how flat is the frequency response of my ear. It's important to have a monitoring system where you can hear what's going on so you're not fooled by it, but we're all going for what we feel in the music. And I don't think any of us has ever said, well, this mix feels great, but it doesn't have enough 5K according to that meter over. Like, it just, that's not a thing.
But
No, but
there is a really interesting. So I didn't include this in the book, but there was a sort of big chunk on Thomas Edison. So father of the recording industry, father of kind of phonographs, all of that. I mean, if not stone deaf, then very close to it. And he had a big sort of recording rivalry for the first technology on the phonogram. I can't remember, they were the Victrola, something like that. And he refused to. He thought, one musician was just as good as another. I mean, why have Mozart when you could have some bloke down the kind of, down the pub with the piano kind of thing? Why would you want, Duke Ellington, where you could get somebody kind of, for a tenth of the price?
Well,
just
there are
coming off
plenty
the
of
street.
people with good hearing who think that way, and some of them work at labels. But I didn't say that.
Yeah,
out.
for sure. But his thing was, his
That's a
form of
joke.
hearing loss made it painful to hear certain sort of chord patterns or certain harmonies. So he wanted a kind of entirely scientific approach to music. What he wanted was simple kind of fifths and thirds and almost a scientific approach to melody. And he wanted music reduced to its absolute kind of basics. He famously kind of sacked off Rachmaninoff because he said he was a basher or something, or kind of what it is. And Rachmaninoff not surprisingly went straight to his rival and made millions for them.
Well, he was a bit of a basher.
He was a bit of a basher, yeah.
Yeah. But because he couldn't hear well, he influenced the whole of the beginning of the recording industry, but he had very specific tastes, and you kind of think, these people write history in their own ways. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, I'll get back to the book, because I had mentioned earlier how the book helped me, and it was, I went through some treatment for a cancer, and it's left me with compromised eustachian tubes. They change throughout the day, throughout the week, so my hearing changes. There's good times, there's bad times. It's all over the place, and while that was happening, and I was freaking out, thinking I'll never, I can't work again. I can't, like, in good faith work. How can I take jobs, like, if I'm like this, And but it was in reading your book, and you have a passage in there about shame and how deep it felt, and it just was this iron breath, you called it, I think, that you'd wake up in the morning and have this, like, it just felt like iron breath when you woke up, and it really got me. But you kept going, you kept working and doing your thing, going to places, talking to, you were doing the Wreckers at the time. The book, The Wreckers, another Bella Bathurst book, really good. And you were going and having to talk to, people in, I don't know the settings, like pubs and stuff, where you say they already had the word no written all over them. And you just persevered. And so that's really my point for people listening who might think that they also are having trouble or have a shame about their hearing. There's lots of good things happening now. Yes, I agree, Andrew. There's lots more awareness. But I really want to hit home that thing of that it's not a good reason to not do the job. Just
But
isn't.
Chad, do you so when you say when you had your treatment, you find that there was certain times of day when you were more able to work or your hearing was better or worse. Does that still apply? Do you still find that you're better working at certain times of day?
Well, no, I didn't know it at the time. I just had to work through it. And what I found out now over the last several years is that it changes. So I no longer do a mix in a day. There's times I was doing two mixes, three mixes a day. It was, like we all wanted to be fast, right? Um, my general mix time is probably, a mix a day. I think that's pretty normal. I don't do that anymore. I get 3 songs or 4 songs going and mix each one, and I might take me 4 or 5 days to mix those 4 songs. So I get to spread out each song over a period of time. So it averages out whatever my ears do. It just averages out the anomalies. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense?
So what's happening is that because previously it was sort of total immersion for a whole day and or and you, but now you want to kind of spread the load and see what happens overnight and kind of or
Yeah.
is it that the what's changed? Why have you changed that kind of daily working thing?
Yeah, because
It sounds
depending on
intense.
but depending, it's actually really nice. I'm really enjoying it. It's more relaxed. Um, now that I've stopped worrying about it, it's humidity, heat. I don't know what the changes are. The how I slept at night, how much coffee I had in the morning, whatever it is. It takes very little to make a change. I can go through hours of it sounding fine. I don't notice anything, and then all of a sudden I go through an hour and I go, oh damn, uh, oh, there's a hi-hat over there. I can't hear it, and I flip my speakers. I do that a lot. I've always done that because of my shooting um, history as a kid. That was happening anyway. So I'm used to flipping my left and right. I don't know if you remember that, Adam. I
Yeah,
used to
yeah. Hmm.
do that. Um, but yes, anyway, it's on. This is just more talk about making it, trying to demystify that whole thing, trying to make it not so sinister or negative. That it actually may be something. Maybe the way I mix and the way it's all ended up has a lot to do. Well, it has to have a lot to do with my uneven ears from childhood. That's why I'm do what I do, the way I do it. So just driving the point a little bit farther home every time I say something like that. That's all I'm doing.
What do
Maybe you
you
have
do, Andrew? Do you work on mixes just intensely for a day, or do
No,
you?
no, I do exactly the same thing because, and there were technical reasons I used to have to mix one song at a time because of the equipment. But once I was working in a way where I can move from one song to another and back, no, I love moving around because I don't, I mean, my hearing, I've got issues and things. And yes, sometimes my ears will plug up, but nothing like what Chad goes through sort of on a daily basis. But my perspective gets totally screwed. I will live in whatever sonic world I'm listening to and get used to it. And after an hour, it's never going to occur to me that there's something fundamentally wrong with what I'm hearing because that's the world I'm in and I can make adjustments and it's productive, but it doesn't give me the perspective I need to know that this is good amongst what's going on in the universe as opposed to compared to an hour ago this is better because it may be better, but it's in a world that's not really going to translate when you hear it fresh. So I might come back around to the same song 2 or 3 times in a day, depending on how many songs I'm working on, how close they are, how much time I spend on each one. But it also frees me up when I open up a song I just don't feel like working on at the moment to go, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to come back to it later anyway.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
never feel like I have to do something specific. The only pressure is like, well, could I take today off completely or not? And when the answer
Yeah.
is no, then you've got pressure. But within that day, yeah, I just move from thing to thing to thing to thing. And lately I've been taking breaks I'm really into this thing called SoundFlow for automating Pro Tools. And so now I'll take a break from mixing to do some coding, because nobody can tell me I did that wrong. It either works or it doesn't, which is a very nice thing. And then come back to it and sort of get analytical for a bit, and then come back and just be listening fresh. So
I guess that's another really interesting question. If you immerse yourself in something and then come out of it and go and do something else. I mean, go and Chad, feed the horses, or go and get the shopping, or kind of whatever it is, or do something, or in Chad's case, go and get completely involved in the photography. Is one seeding the other?
It could be. I think it's just using your brain differently on anything gives you the ability to just be a listener fresh when you come back to it. I don't know. I mean, I get ideas from things, but I don't know that I'll like specifically get an idea that's sort of cross-platform from a different art form. I certainly get ideas listening to music that has nothing to do with the music I'm working on. Especially listening to the colors in some classical pieces will make me think like, ooh, I want to make that sort of shimmery thing. And so the effects and the way stuff feels. But I don't think I would ever sort of look at a painting and think, okay, I want to mix something a certain way because of that. But it's definitely inspiring and just gets your brain away from it.
What about you, Adam? I mean, do you find that do you still make music, or
we gotta get Adam's whole story here. Maybe we should segue.
I've completely stopped doing music. I'm a full-time graduate student, and
but you wouldn't use one to sort of inspire the other.
Not directly, but I do think that for me, they're both trying to answer the same kind of questions, trying to connect with life, understand, find meaning in life, those kind of things in a technical framework where, I did that engineering and music. Music obviously is an art form. You connect with it, in the way that you do with any art. And I find that same thing in physics and astrophysics, understanding your place in the universe, how everything works, all that kind of stuff. So on that level, I do find a definite connection.
So I guess the obvious question is why astrophysics? How did you end up?
Well, could you just give us like a brief bio that gets us up to why astrophysics, just so people who don't know, because I think your pre-astrophysics history is pretty damn cool too.
Yeah, let me just ask, just if you can give us a little bit of a bio of how we know each other, what you went on to do, because you engineered for a pretty heavy hitter for a long time. But then also, wouldn't mind you commenting on, like, there's astrophysics and there's astronomy and cosmology and what those differences are, and go.
All right. So I started off in recording as Chad's assistant at the Sunset Sound Factory. I started off as the telephone T guy, runner, moved up to be Chad's assistant, and then went on to engineer for Daniel Lanois for about 10 years. And then did some freelance recording with John Frusciante, Chili Peppers, people like that in Los Angeles. And then after about 15 years in LA, my wife and I moved to Paris because she wanted to start a PhD and I was ready to make a change. I was already sort of easing my way out of the music business when it went from being in a studio with a group of people, creating something that wasn't there before, collaborating, to sitting in front of a computer by yourself in your own bedroom. The band is in Tel Aviv. I gave it a go, but I decided that was not for me. So when we lived in Paris, I was still working in recording, and started doing an undergrad degree in physics part-time. And it was a distance learning school in the UK called the Open University. So I started that part-time when I wasn't working, just to give me something to do. Going way back, when I was younger, I was always interested in physics and music. So I decided to do music, but I was, engineering has a lot of physics in it, a lot of, technical aspects. So that kind of fueled my interest in engineering.
Were you looking, like when you were doing engineering in those years and stuff, were you thinking in terms of physics, or were you that into physics at the time? Or?
I was always amazed by looking in the recording studio and looking at all the outboard gear and the microphones, the tape machine and the speaker, and the signal flow and the physics involved with going from sound in the air, pressure waves through the microphone, microphone level to the preamp, line level, through all that gear, all in real time, comes out of the speakers after all that processing, off the tape, everything. I love all of that. And that's physics, but that's what we all love. That's engineering.
Yeah.
So I did always look at it that way, more so than from the side of a musician, because I'm not a musician. I mean, I can play the drums a little, but so it was always sort of the technical physics aspect of it that I liked.
Okay, well, cool.
So
and so the with astrophysics, and what's the difference between, like, there's those branches?
Technically, in the professional world, astronomy and astrophysics are the same thing. My department at Boston University is called the Department of Astronomy. The department at University of Chicago is called Physics and Astrophysics. So it's the same thing essentially, but to the layman and to me, sort of coming into it, astronomy was what's in the sky, where is it, and what is it, what sort of constellations does it form, those kind of things, which actually is astrometry. So it's like mapping the sky.
I never heard of that before.
Astrophysics is, astro means star, it's the physics of stars.
Okay.
So
and then cosmology, how does that fit in?
Okay, cosmology is what I'm interested in. That is the sort of the astrophysics of the entire universe, the origin of the universe, the evolution, and the fate. So you've got cosmic inflation, then the Big Bang, then we understand the physics back to 0.032 zeros 1 second after the Big Bang. We can describe exactly what happened in all of that physics going back that far up until now, and can show evidence for all of it. It's quite amazing. So then there's going to be an evolution of the universe, and then an eventual end of the universe, or whatever it evolves to at infinity, time infinity. That's cosmology.
Okay.
So cosmology entails all the universe, all the stuff in it, dark matter, dark energy, all that kind of stuff, which I find very interesting.
So if you're doing your PhD, you've gotten super specific. So what is your doctorate actually in?
So, cheers. So I'm just in my first year, and I would like to preface everything with saying I'm not an expert. I'm a student and an enthusiast, but I'm working on it. What I'm studying, I'm interested in cosmology. So I'm studying the formation of galaxies and dark matter halos that surround these galaxies. It turns out that galaxies and stars and everything that we see, which is only about 5% of the mass and energy in the universe, what we could call luminous matter, as opposed to dark matter, stuff that we can see. Those objects can only form inside big halos of dark matter. And there's a reason for this a simple way to describe that is, if you have a big trampoline, big flat trampoline, you may have heard this before in regards to gravity. If you have a big flat trampoline and you sprinkle a bunch of ping pong balls on it, they're just going to be lying flat across it. And you can think of after the Big Bang, all of the hydrogen in the universe as these ping pong balls just lying flat on it. If you then put a bowling ball in the middle, you know what's going to happen. It's going to dip down and they're all going to fall into that. So without that bowling ball, those hydrogen atoms, which is what makes up stars and galaxies, they don't have enough mass on their own, because we know how much there is, to fall into these what are called wells, like a well of gravitational potential. So we know that these things can only form in these big dark matter halos. So I'll wrap it up. What I'm looking at—
No, don't wrap it up.
Is
that's why we're here.
I'm looking at large galaxies like the Milky Way that have smaller galaxies that orbit around them, just like the planets orbit around the sun.
Yeah.
And by looking at the distribution of them, because they are luminous matter, we hope to trace the shape of the dark matter. Because you can't see the dark matter. The only way that we know about dark matter is by its gravitational interaction.
Right.
So
that's what I'm doing.
Nice.
So
Okay.
I'm studying I'm studying what we call host satellite galaxy systems. So a big galaxy with a bunch of satellite galaxies that orbit around it.
So what are the satellite galaxies for the Milky Way?
The Milky Way, surprisingly, which I did not know, has about 60 satellite galaxies.
You're kidding.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can see, if you're in the southern hemisphere, Chad, you may have seen them in Australia, the Large Magellanic Cloud.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a smudge in the sky. That's the largest of the satellite galaxies. And then there's a small Magellanic Cloud. And then you can just Google on, put into Google like satellites of the Milky Way, and you get this list. They just have weird names. You get a list of about 60 galaxies that orbit around the Milky Way, which is pretty
But
impressive.
Andromeda is not one of them, right? That's our nearest.
Andromeda is a Milky Way-like galaxy, which what I would call in my study another host galaxy. And it has a bunch of satellite galaxies going around it.
I've got some right there. Well, you can't see them; it's too dark in it. But I have my astronomical binoculars, and which I love looking through. It's, they're not really incredibly powerful, but it's one of my favorite things to look at. Are some of the nebulas, and but Andromeda. I never cease to love looking at it, even though it's this it's just a nondescript sort of blur.
Smudge, yeah.
I still find it really hard to get my head around that's so far beyond all the stars that we can see.
Yeah. And then it's in that little blob are hundreds of billions of stars with hundreds of billions of planets going around them. It's just mind-blowing. And that is...
So what do you listen to when you're doing all this? What kind of music? Let's tie this in with this music now.
Mostly when I'm working, I listen to atmospheric music like the early Eno records, Harold Budd records.
Come on, man.
That kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
Any music with lyrics I get, or production that is not as simple as that atmospheric stuff, I just start thinking about, mixing with the masters.
Hey,
how they got the kick drum sound and all that.
Do you know the early Tangerine Dream stuff, like Phaedra? Do you know that album?
No, I don't, but I'll check it out.
Check that out. But you would know Fripp and Eno, No Pussyfooting.
Yes. Yeah.
That has some wonderful stuff on there for that kind of.
Yeah, and Let the Power Fall is another great Frippertronics one.
Yeah. There's a lot of that good stuff. Hey, maybe we can collaborate on something. Do music for the host galaxies, or music for the.
That would be great. Yeah.
We could do something like that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Andrew, you're into astrophotography, right?
Yeah, I'd like to be into it. I'm terrible at it. I've had very good luck with 2 eclipses. Chad and I got some great pictures of the solar eclipse that was 5 years ago now, something like that. Yeah, and then I got really good pictures of a lunar eclipse, and then it all falls apart when I need to be on. Basically, I had a mount that was not suitable for long exposure photography. It was not tilted. So I got a wedge, put it under, and I've never gotten it set up properly to do long exposure photography, and it's bummed me out. And then we've moved, and haven't figured out where to set up the telescope. So I'm incredibly interested in it, but I'm so bad at it that it frustrates me when I spend 2.5 hours on you finally get a clear night, and of course every clear night is freezing, and I'm freezing and I get absolutely nothing. And then I go back inside and just start drinking beer. So I would
You guys get a nice dark sky up there, though, I imagine.
It's not too bad. Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, but the problem with the UK is you've got like 5 atmospheric systems that are all right above us. So even when it's clear, the air is not very still. The sea still never that great.
There are some clear, incredibly clear nights, but they're just not enough of them. But you're out at your place, Bella. That just looked like it would be unbelievable on a clear night.
It's extraordinary, and particularly at the moment. I mean, I am no expert or scholar on the sky, but it is absolutely extraordinary. But I mean, I guess what fascinates me about what Adam is doing is that it's so. I don't know. I mean, I guess to move from something that's very tangible, i.e., music. You produce music, you get a mix, you have a physical object at the end of it, you've got a bunch of sounds, to this stuff which is literally light years away. I mean, I mean, you're dealing in, as you say, in infinity and beyond kind of thing, and it just feels like kind of, you know, if you go from this very sort of concrete thing to this thing which is by definition as enormous as you get and as abstract as you get, and as you say, you have all the physics to explain the Big Bang, but that's it. It's a bunch of equations kind of thing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If you think equations are abstract, then it's abstract, but it's not ethereal or far away. I'm doing things right in front of me. There are equations. I'm using databases with, you know, millions of galaxies with all kinds of concrete parameters about each galaxy.
It's a lot more known, I would think. I mean,
it's very well understood.
The part that's interesting to me, though, is that what you're doing is something that can never be directly observed. You're doing it all based on the effects of other observations and trying to connect the dots.
Well, in terms of dark matter, yes, but the stuff about dark matter is an inference that you make from my work, but the work that I'm doing is very concrete. You can see it all. In fact, I set up a little demonstration that I could show you.
Yes, please.
If you want. So what I do is I get so I'm not doing the observing myself because I want hundreds of these systems, and each system has 5 to 20 little satellite galaxies. So it's just too many, and I'm not just gonna look for them blindly because I'd never find them. So what I do is I use this big sky survey called the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, and it's publicly available. I go on their website and I download this huge database of galaxies, millions of galaxies, and all kinds of parameters about them. Then I use Python code and I find the types of systems that I'm looking for within this big database. So for example, I find a host satellite that has, say, a host galaxy that has, say, 15 satellites going around it. So I get the coordinates of that host, and I put them in. Let's see if this works.
So it's like sat-nav for galaxies.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So see this? Can you guys see that page?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I put in the coordinates here, kind of like latitude and longitude, and I say my search radius. So this is the Sloan Digital Sky Survey search page. It has lots of different things. I submit my request, and then it comes up with all of these objects that are within that little radius of sky that I asked it to search. And type 3 is a star, type 6 is a galaxy. So we'll click on that one. And then this is a page that has some information about it. But if I click on that, that is an actual picture. Now, granted, I'm not looking at it in the sky through a telescope myself, but you should know no professional astronomy is done with an eyepiece on a telescope. It's all very large telescopes. They're computer controlled. You know,
So these are these kind of massive observatories in
South America,
yeah.
Hawaii, yeah. So this all comes out of an observatory in Arizona, where they constantly just look at big portions of the sky and catalog everything they see. So here's my host galaxy, and if I click on the center of it, I get some information over here, and I can click on this page, and I get information, the brightness, and different, so these are basically different color bandwidths. So if you think, you can always think of light in the same way you think of sound. Frequency, wavelength, instead of pitch, it's color. So there's green color, red color, different bandwidths, lots of information. And then if I go back to this, if I zoom out a little bit, I can see here are some smaller galaxies. So it's really an incredible feeling to be looking through all this data, which is basically like a spreadsheet. God. And then you say, okay, this might be a system that I'm interested in. And then you go and look on this database, and there's your big bright galaxy. And here are some small, so here's a little galaxy, lumpy-dump, few 100 million stars that are gravitationally bound to this big galaxy. And if I zoom out further, I can see more. This one, in fact, has 17. Look at that guy. And then you can zoom in on them.
Wow.
There's a few more over there. This one has, look at that guy. I mean, it's amazing. So this galaxy, which likely no one knows anything about, except for what's on this little website, no one's really studied. It's one of 2 trillion galaxies that are out there.
So you would study their characteristics, or you would.
So yeah, what I do is I look at lots of systems like this, and this is a perfect example. I chose it for this reason. And I look at the distribution of the satellite galaxies around the host. And what you expect is to find them evenly distributed. Like if you think of it like the face of a clock, with the host in the middle, you'd expect overall, that's why you need hundreds of them to do statistics, you expect them to be evenly distributed. Anywhere you look, you'd have a sort of equal chance of finding a galaxy around your host. What I have found, in fact, is that they're lopsided, like this one, where most of them are on this left-hand side here. They're mostly between like 12 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Okay. Which is odd and leads us to believe that they are, in fact, not tracing the shape of the dark matter halo. So we do make inferences. That's when the theorists get involved and they sort of help interpret it. But my work is observational.
And then, sorry, just to be a total geek about this stuff, when you're looking at that website, how do you differentiate between things that are just optically close and things that are actually circling that galaxy? Because obviously it could just be in that part of the sky, but 100 million years further away.
That is very astute. Okay, so we'll go back to it.
Yay.
So when you're looking at the sky, everything is flattened. It's all, as far as you're concerned, basically the same distance. You can say something there or it's over there. So that's your 2-dimensional pointing. But in the 3rd dimension, radially from you, you do not know how far away it is. So very good question. This galaxy right here, let's zoom in a little. So if that's my host galaxy and I want to ask whether this satellite galaxy is at the same distance, we use one of these, which is called a spectrum. And the spectrum has little spikes and dips that are very well known that correlate to the electron transfer energy in certain elements. So let's say you have a hydrogen atom. Hydrogen is one proton and it has one electron. If that electron gets excited to a higher energy, this is quantum mechanics. It can only be either an energy 1 or an energy 2. It can't be in between 1.5. It's quantized, just like an audio, quantized. Either 1 or 2. It has to be on that rail. When it goes from 1 to 2, it absorbs a photon of light of exactly that energy. When it goes from 2 to 1, it emits a photon of light of exactly that energy. So this little, see this little H alpha right here? It looks like an HA.
Yeah.
That's H alpha. H alpha is a hydrogen emission line that we know very well from our laboratories here on Earth what energy that would be at. So you can say this is like a 10K tone. It's 10K. I know it's 10K. You know it's 10K. Now, if you put that 10K tone on an ambulance and it drives towards you, you hear a 12K tone because of a Doppler shift. If it drives away from you, you're going to hear an 8K tone because of a Doppler shift. So in this world, if we're looking at this, and angstroms are just a measure of distance, if the wavelength is, say, 6,732 angstroms, but I know it's supposed to be 6,727, I know that that galaxy is moving towards me at a certain speed. So cool. It's exactly like that. It's either red shift or blue shift. If it's coming towards you, it's blue shifted because it's shifted towards shorter wavelengths, which is blue light. And if it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue. If it's red shifted, it's going away from you, shifted towards red frequencies. So because of dark energy, so if I look at this, my main galaxy, right here, I have redshift. See that?
Yeah.
And the redshift is 0.016. That's a measure of how fast it's moving away from me. Now, if I go to my little guy, I have to get right on it. Okay, so if I go to my little guy's page, the redshift is also 0.16.
Right, so they're the same distance from us, or well,
they're the
moving
same
at the
distance
same
from us.
speed away, which means they're the same distance.
Yes, because of dark energy, which causes the universe to expand. So due to dark energy, the farther away something is from you, the faster it is receding from you. So if something's, say, 1 mile away, it's receding at 10 meters a second. If it's 2 miles away, 20 meters a second, 3 miles away, 40 meters a second. So if I see that thing it's moving away at 40 meters a second, I know it's 30 meters away, or whatever. Same thing. So that's how you know it. And again, to Bella's question, to the point of this whole thing, it's so easy to understand for an audio engineer because you understand frequencies, how it relates to pitch. Doppler shift is easy to understand. This is the same way that they took that. You can understand the way that they took that picture of the black hole last year with the Event Horizon Telescope.
Yeah.
They have these radio dishes all over the world, and radio waves are very, very long. They can be hundreds of kilometers long. They're light waves. And they use the time coherence of the phase of the wave landing at the different sites to line them back up and make a camera or a telescope the size of the Earth. So it's, again, something that you can very easily understand.
You're basically saying everything is waves and everything is frequencies. Everything doesn't matter whether you're mixing a track or you're trying to find the distance away that a galaxy is.
You can understand them in the same terms. Yeah.
Yes.
They're different types of waves. Sound is pressure waves. Light is electromagnetic waves. But you can understand them.
Hey, this brings to mind, it's a shift, but why not? Also, Peter Hamill had a very good song called Red Shift. You know Peter Hamill? He was the singer and writer from a band called Van der Graaf Generator.
Oh, yeah.
You might really like him, but he wrote about Red Shift. Sorry, this is connected. about this waves and stuff that all interleaves, and what you were saying earlier, Adam, about how all we're all just looking for things to explain life, whether it's in music or what you were doing. There is a chapter in Bella's book, The Wreckers, about the Goodwin Sands, and I don't remember you specifically. You went out there, didn't you?
I went out there. It's a really weird place. It's in the Channel. It's in the English Channel, and it's the sands shift, and they're known as the ship swallowers because over centuries and centuries they've just swallowed a lot of ships basically,
So
and
it's,
jobs or whatever. And
yeah, so it's like sand. It's kind of like sand dunes. They're constantly shifting. They're never the same twice, so you can't map them.
yeah,
But you can. I've seen pictures of people landing on them in helicopters. And then they're gone the next day. And very dangerous. What is it? Off the coast of Kent there. I don't know if you can see
yeah,
that.
yeah. They're kind of creepy places, very creepy. But
Yeah.
I guess, but yeah, I mean that's it's waves because they could. The thing with the good ones is they appear and disappear. So sometimes the good ones are the islands above the waves, and sometimes they're below. But when you recognise that the tide is receding, the waves get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And obviously, when the tide is coming back, the waves get bigger. It's a spooky place.
So it for me, I really see a connection between like talking about dark matter and all the stuff moving out there, and especially stuff that you can't see, and necessarily why you have to infer how something's moving from another thing. I can really get that with the like in the ocean, and that's just a really good example. I find that really kind of scary that I never knew of that area until reading that in the Wreckers.
It's a good point.
Never heard anybody talk about it at all. Have you ever heard of that?
No,
No.
it doesn't sound like something you hear of and then survive. Like that's it. You hear about it and
Well,
then you're dead.
No, well, that's pretty much it. Basically, but they are. I mean, they're kind of spooky things. But there's something very. I mean, it's a nice link, I guess, Adam, between the sound engineering and what you're doing now. That as you say, they're different types of waves, but some of those graphs on that demonstration, yeah, it kind of looked like, all right, okay, so this is not a million miles away from. So
Yeah, well, it was the frequency response of the light we're
yeah,
getting
yeah.
from the galaxy, basically.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So when you talk about it sort of in a bar and you're getting sort of psychedelic about how big the universe is and it's so awe-inspiring, that's what draws you in. But the day-to-day of it is actually quite concrete and you know, just like recording, where you get into the nuts and bolts of it. The music is quite ethereal, and that's your inspiration, is how it moves you. But as a technician, it's quite specific and concrete, and you have to do it if you want a result the right way. You know?
So, would you say there's anything that you used to get emotionally from working on music that you get from doing this work? Like when you tie something together and make a discovery, or
Absolutely. Just, I mean, as simple as finding those galaxy systems on paper, a bunch of numbers, that to me is, there is an abstraction to it. And then seeing the images of it, sort of is similar to me to a feeling of a song that you worked on coming on the radio or hearing it. No, that sounds great. Oh, I worked on that, It gives you a similar type of sensation.
Yeah.
do you get the same? Do you get the same thing with music and photography? Do you get the same emotional? If you take a great picture, do you get as much from that as you do from mixing a really good track, or are you just further down the line with the music than you just at a different stage with it?
Yeah, probably. I mean, the thing is about being a mixer. I'm also a musician. I'm not a really good musician, but I can do enough. I can be good enough to play on people's records if the track is good and I can enhance it. To do something on my own is another story. I can do it, but it's very difficult for me. It's a lot of work because I'm not a prolific player. So as a mixer, I always think of myself as somebody who I'm always working on what you'd say, like it's the same as how I did my metal art when I was welding. I'm not good at creating from nothing. You show me something, a found object of some kind. If you just give me a blank piece of metal, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But if you give me an old rusted bent up thing that has the look of, oh, I can almost see an eyebrow there or a chin, then I can take that somewhere. And I feel the same with music. So as a mixer, you send me a song and I know whether I think I can make it better and whether I want to or not, and I can really go. So I get a certain amount of satisfaction out of that, and I've been doing it for so long. But with photography, again, there's an argument to be made that I'm still working with found objects, but at the same time, for me, I feel like I've done more. If I take a picture and I see it and I think it's really good, I get I kind of get more from that because it's my own thing. I'm not I'm not it's not a collaboration. And I like collaboration, but I also like doing stuff on my own too. I think everybody needs, you know, both. It's not, you don't have one or the other. It's, we like to do all sorts of things and mix things up. So for me at the moment, the oh yeah, uh, I find my photography in some ways, when I think with what you were asking, is more fulfilling for me
I guess, yeah,
because
partly that, and
it's completely mine. It's completely mine. Nobody's telling me. Nobody's making me doing a revision.
Well,
Oh, can you go back and make the whites? No, I like it like this. Mixing. I do my thing and then constantly get told to change it.
I think that the engineer and mixer job especially, but just anybody working on sort of the technical side of recording, there isn't really a parallel in other artistic endeavors. It's like you could have a publisher for your book who at the end of the process can come and give you suggestions and help you rework things or whatever, but you've created the initial version of it by yourself. And you could say, well, but that's like the songwriter writing the song and then some, but you're much further along in the process before other people's artistic input is necessarily needed. Whereas if you're talking about sort of modern recording, we're trying to be creative, but never on our own artistic thing, like Chad was talking about. We're working on somebody else's music and trying to help them realize it. And it's a very weird situation to be in. And in a way, I suppose for film, it's like being a director of photography or something like that, where you're very creative and have a huge impact on what the final product will be, but you did not have anything to do with writing the script or deciding how it was going to be shot or when or whatever. You're just there to make whatever the situation you're presented with come as close to the artistic vision that you were told about with a little bit of your own mixed in. And it's a really odd place to be sometimes, because you have to have an artistic vision for it as you do it, but it may or may not clash with the original artistic intent, and that may or may not be a good thing. And it is weird, and I think about this stuff all the time, trying to find parallels, and you can find little bits of it in other places, but it's a really weird gig.
so when you started out, did you start out feeling quite possessive or quite a strong sense of ownership over what you'd done, or was it always a kind of,
I
this is
think with
my input,
anything,
and now
I think, well, and I could be wrong, but I think most engineers, when they start out and they finally get in a position to really influence a recording, think like, great, and they kind of want to take over. And you do learn a bit that it isn't your project, because there is a learning curve, especially for recording. It's equipment.
Yeah, that's
I
what I
mean,
was going to say.
these days it's pretty
You guys are
simple.
mostly just mixing now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
More of that can go in when you're doing the recording.
yeah. But
Certainly more input. And
I think that there aren't that many engineers or mixers who can just sort of take ownership and say, I'm doing what I want, even though it's your thing,
yeah,
because it is very
of
definitely
course.
not their project. You know, there's no way their name's going on the front of the record if there were artwork, which there isn't. That's a different conversation. But it is such a weird position. You start from a position of knowing that it isn't your artistic creation, but you could be a huge part of it. I mean, Chad has been, and Daniel and the records you worked on with him are some of the most influential artistic producers there have ever been. I mean, gigantic stamps on records that they've worked on, and have more artistic input, I think, than a lot of other people. But even, I mean, I'm sure Chad would say that, you know, the records he mixes are not his records. He's doing his artistic thing to those records, but it is still somebody else's record, at the beginning
Yeah.
and the end of the day.
Actually, if there's
Absolutely.
a parallel, it is actually with. I mean, I would have said it's the old-fashioned film printers, and I worked in a photographic lab for a bit, a professional photographic lab, and just at the division between film and digital, and the old film printers had spent, you know, a lifetime, quite possibly sometimes their fathers before them, learning how to, literally by adding kind of a notch more cyan or a notch more less magenta or kind of whatever, completely change the feel and the emotion of a picture. And you know, all of that is done with Photoshop now. All of that is infinitely achievable in digital, but there was something about the fact that what they were producing had literal physical depth. It was an emulsion, you know, you were printing on paper as opposed to kind of, you know, a flat layer of pixels, which was extraordinary. So I was working in a place with Jürgen Teller, who was doing a lot of printing. He only worked ever with one printer, Dave Cheney, and he would give his stuff to Dave, and Dave would put his mix on it. He would produce these pictures which were part Jürgen. Clearly, it was Jürgen who had taken the picture. Clearly, it was Jürgen's concept, but it then became Dave's. And if you talk to Jürgen, he would have said, you know, Dave was half the process. I mean, or certainly he was the final end of the process, and Jürgen couldn't have done what he did or get to where he got to.
And I think the only difference is you have to expand it out to the point where Dave would start going to the shoots and saying, well, you're going to use that lens? Come on,
Yeah,
man, let's use
yeah.
this. It's a weird thing in record making where it's every technical part of the process as opposed to different people handling different bits of the technical part themselves. I mean, obviously the playing of the instrument is the musician's, but from that point on, it's someone else's. So it's, I mean, it is the same thing. I'm not trying to argue that it's special in some way, but it's weird how unique an instance of it is. Because you'd like to be able to find parallels, like, oh well, there should be this sort of exactly the same role in other art forms, but it's different in every art form. But I think that's important.
So whoever it is, the Arctic Monkeys decide that they want to record a new album, and they already know that they're going to get you to do the mix on it, because that is as crucial as it is to have, you know, that guitarist or that studio or kind of whatever it is. Is that how it works?
Yeah,
Um,
sometimes,
yeah.
and sometimes they're just fishing.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially bands, established bands, they have an idea, and then it's trying to find the right person to help realize that. They're not necessarily just like, well, we don't know, but that guy's cool.
And
It's they're working
we're
towards something.
and we're also we audition quite often. I mean, still
Yeah.
to this day. I mean, I do. I'm not positive about Andrew, but I still get people saying, you know, want you to mix an album. Would you mind doing a song? And let's see how it goes. And they'll get 4 or 5 mixers to mix a song, and they'll decide who they want to use for the album.
Oh right, so you effectively sort of tender for it.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
which
Okay.
is quite, you know, I hate it. I like the idea of them. I don't mind trying out. I don't like auditioning against other people. Like, I'm fine to say, look, just let's make sure that this is going to be right for the project. But I don't. That's a very different thing to me than saying, hey, let's just get 5 people to do mixes and then we can pick one, because they're not invested in the process at that point. That would be like sending prints off to 5 different printers, and then like whoever happened to get closest with no input whatsoever, like, oh, we'll go with them, as opposed to what they really wanted was someone super creative, but that person happened to go in a weird direction to begin with, but it turns out the relationship would be really good. So I'd like them to at least be pretending like they really want me to get the gig, and then we go back and forth, and if I don't get the gig, it's absolutely fine. I never feel possessive about it. But
But
there's a
it's like,
big
is there
difference.
like a sort of courtship process where they approach you and then it's kind of like, how serious are you,
Well,
and
it's
all of this?
more it's a difference between auditioning, which I don't mind, and it just being some weird shootout thing. Like, how many people can we get to do this? And great, we'll have all of them do it, and then usually the decision isn't based on what they got back anyway. So it's a really weird situation to be in. But yeah, people still want it, and I understand why they want it, because it's their baby, it's their art, and this is the final stage before it goes out into the world, and they want it to be right.
I'm actually more comfortable with it, to be honest with you, when I do that, because it makes me think, oh, I'll just do what I want to do, and if they don't like it, they don't like it, and I'm not committed.
Yeah,
And it kind of frees me up, thinking I'll just do my thing, and then I don't have
And
to
if they
worry
go
about.
with you, that's they want what you
Sorry?
do. If they go with you to mix the record, that they're going to want what you're going to come up with.
Well, you would hope so, but
Yeah,
you'd be
you'd be
surprised.
surprised. No, no, you wouldn't be surprised, would you? Hey,
No.
I've got some questions, so we can, there's, we'll take
Yeah,
as many as
well,
we can, but it's also, before we sign off, I've got a note here. I guess somebody's asking, can Adam show how to use that site? So maybe we'll
yeah,
do that towards the end here. We'll just have a little, because I think we'll all want to make notes on that.
yeah.
um, is that a subscription site or anything? Is it a free
No,
site?
it's a free
Okay.
site.
and there's
And
also
can
a
you access
free.
it with Macs?
Yeah, I'm on a Mac. Yeah.
Oh, you are.
And
Okay.
there's a course on, I believe it's on Coursera, because I'm actually thinking about doing it. I'm learning Python as we speak.
Oh
That
yeah.
is exactly that. It's how to analyze the data from these surveys using Python to get an idea of what it is. So
Specifically for astronomical surveys.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, wow.
absolutely. So
It's
who knows? The course could be terrible,
probably
but
this survey. This is the big one, the Sloan Digital Sky survey.
yeah, I would imagine so.
All right,
But
cool.
All
yeah,
right.
well,
Well,
definitely, I want to see more about that later.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
something
we'll
that
get.
I had to learn over the last couple of years, is Python, because as I said, professional astronomy, astrophysics is not looking through telescopes.
Yeah.
Now the amount of data is so large that you have to be able to deal with big data sets, and you do that with Python code. Well, I do it with Python code. Most people do.
So yeah, we'll do that. Just before we sign off, we'll go. We'll have, I don't know, 5 minutes to see how to work that thing, and take notes. So here's a question. I'm an audio engineer, and both my young kids were born severely deaf. Do you guys think the future holds new opportunities for people with hearing aids and cochlear implants? That's from Rees Broomfield. He's in mixing and production. I don't really know much about hearing aids and cochlear implants. Bella, you might know more about that, the sort of current state of the art.
Yeah, I mean, because the technology is advancing so far, so fast. I am, and they are fitting cochlear implants to children who are younger, and babies who are younger and younger. I'm probably not the right person to ask about the technology. I mean, I think in terms of the opportunities for anyone who has um, a severe hearing loss. I think, I mean, one of the things that I find really interesting was not this is a deprivation, this is a a loss, hearing loss, it's what actually do you hear or understand? How do you understand the world differently to everybody else, and what does that bring?
Yeah.
Where is the gain? What could you bring to music, or what could you bring to an understanding of sound, or what could you bring to the world, or how are those kids going to, uh, you know, totally change the world because they see it, understand it differently. There is also that thing about uh, the if you have one sense which is not necessarily as kind of tuned up as the other senses compensate.
Yep.
And I mean, it is a kind of recognized phenomenon where you're extra sensory. You see, you start seeing 360 or feeling
The other, yeah.
360, and so all of those senses will tune up and are already being tuned up, I would have thought. And again, that's hugely interesting. So I would have thought those children have a huge amount to to offer the world, as much as it's a real, it's obviously a kind of a challenge at times as well.
Well, the technology is definitely getting better. I have read a few things about, implants and things that are attached to the brain, and there's plenty of research to be done there. I also wonder, like, I don't know, when you say severely, your kids are born severely deaf, Reese, if, how, I don't know exactly what that entails, but, might be interesting to play them if they can hear. Severely deaf would mean to me maybe they can't hear anything,
Yeah, I
but if they
think
can hear.
there's different official classifications. So there's a difference between severely deaf and profoundly deaf. Profoundly deaf is the auditory nerve is probably damaged, and there is very little sanguinarity. Severely deaf may or may, I mean, this person could correct me, but I think means that there is some residual capacity to hear.
I wonder if you've tried any kind of playback for them, playing binaurally recorded sound, because that can. I've heard reports that listening to binaural recorded sound is easier for people with hearing loss, to be able to hear stuff. And I don't know. I'll just throw that out there.
We'll also use subwoofers because I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it's part of the plasticity of the brain. And I don't know of any studies to do with trying to do this with sound, but I know there have been very successful studies turning visual input into sensory input, like tactile input, where I mean, these are crazy. It sounds like made up science fiction, but this is actually true, where you take a 16-bit light sensor camera that then has a pad that has, I don't even know exactly what it is. I guess like very small pins. So whenever a pixel lights up, the pin pushes out. You can then put this on your tongue, and after several hours, your brain starts to figure out that this is visual input, and you can actually see what the camera is being pointed at, because your brain will rewire on the fly, and it doesn't take a gigantic amount of time. And like that particular one it's very low resolution, but it was for military units who are working in the dark, so infrared, low resolution cameras pointing backwards. And they would sense movement, know what direction it's coming from, and your brain automatically learns. So I would imagine there are ways to use rather than a camera, some sort of microphone, and then I don't know what the experience would be. It'd probably be horrendous. But the other thing is that, I mean, traditionally, we've all been told, like, hearing loss is forever. You know, if you damage your hearing, like, that's it, especially with tinnitus. But in the last couple of years, they've started to find some therapies that actually work. So I think there's a lot of feedback stuff to the brain that can help that. I don't know that that's going to be relevant in this particular situation, but for those with ringing or the more classic tinnitus, which is not nearly as severe as what I think he's talking about, there could well be treatments where we thought that it was completely irreversible.
Right. This is a question to me, sort of in the same area about hearing. Chad, do you think hearing loss has caused you to be more motivated, like you need it more, even just to prove it to yourself. Sure. Up and down. There were days where I thought I just should not be in the business. I was delusional. I should just, that happened before my treatment as well, when I started finding out that my ears were kind of messed up from shooting all those years. That I went through a period of that. Not heavy, but I worried when I was getting started out. And yeah, I did. I got motivated. And then when it happened again after my treatment, it was more severe for me because I had been established and been working for a long time. And I thought I was going to lose everything I had gotten, I had worked for. It's that thing of perseverance, really, isn't it? And sometimes you need a little, a kick up the ass sometimes. Read sound, you'll get a nice kick up the ass for that kind of a thing. That's perseverance, brilliant perseverance.
What about focus? Do you think, I mean, I guess because sometimes people say if you've got hearing loss, it's fantastic because you have your own kind of sound filter. It screens out everything and it allows you to concentrate. Did you ever find that, or was it?
No. I didn't find an extra focus. It actually it was something that actually took focus away because I was so aware of anomalies, and I really get hyper aware of my hearing when it's not flowing. If I don't get in my emotional sort of catch my wave in listening to a song and just start losing myself in it. That happens when everything's just sounding right and I'm open and I think I'm hearing everything perfectly. If that changes, then that flow is gone and I'm...
Yeah, I mean, any input you get that isn't what you're expecting to get from any sense, it makes you panic. I mean, that's the way your body responds to it. So, I mean, if your hearing changed, you would get used to it, but when it's a moving target, I would imagine you'd never get used to it enough to hear past it. It would be...
There's also kind of that thing of and the thing that really surprised me when I started talking to people with any kind of hearing loss, didn't matter how they'd lost it or what the situation was every single one of them said it's knackering, it's really, really exhausting. Because your brain is working that much harder to process sound and to decode it, all the stuff that the stuff that's getting through the mechanical, the physical bits of the ears, and then getting into to the brain, and the brain is just having to kind of I mean, your brain it eats a lot of capacity as it is.
Yeah.
But it kind of it's effectively sort of doubling that, and most of the people who I spoke to said that they had to manage their sleep and their energy levels to a really insane degree, and also kind of manage different situations. So kind of lockdown's great for that, unfortunately. Kind of being at home and that sort of thing, because pubs, restaurants, bars, concert halls, theatres, all of those places, absolute nightmares in terms of kind of sound processing.
Yeah. That was, thanks, Charlie Markson, for that last question. I'm just going to read a couple things there because these are all related. And in fact, some of them aren't even questions. There's just a statement here. Arlo Tar is saying, anyone following Elon Musk's work with the neural link, chips implanted in the brain to fix these issues? That's kind of what I was mentioning about some of the more state-of-the-art stuff. So I'm not following that, but I'm, he's into a lot of stuff. As crazy as that dude is, he's
turns out he's pretty fucking
positive force in the world, man.
He's not very popular in astronomy right now for putting those Starlink satellites up.
Oh dear. Okay. Yeah.
It's not very popular in many places at the moment.
No. I mean, he's popular. I just love that he had the landing rockets and all that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he does amazing things.
M. Thrasher, at Respacedom, on my daughter. Born with a moderate severe hearing loss, experience so far playing music, I'd say most definitely yes. I'm not sure what that's being said. The parents need to advocate like hell and be super supportive. I would agree with that.
And I wasn't kidding about the subwoofer thing. There's something to be said for like turn your speakers on the floor
Feeling
and
the
play
sound.
some Bob Marley and let the kids just hang
Feel
out
it.
on the speakers. They'll love it.
What what about the old what was that called? The bone phone. Remember those? They weren't very good. It was like the 80s or something. You wrapped this thing around your neck and it played the music through your shoulders, you know.
That's cool.
Implants, M. Thrasher. Implants are a hard choice to make with the invasive surgery and rapid change technology. The change in tech for hearing aids in the last 15 years has been phenomenal. Okay, well that's good. That's good news. I'm sure it is. I mean, they're gonna do. I mean, just the operation that Bella had, that was replacing your stapes, right, with a little titanium stapes. I mean, this tiny little thing.
Yeah, I got two little titanium question marks, one in each ear, and they're like little hooks, and I mean that's extraordinary. But and amazingly, that it's called a stapedectomy. That form of operation has existed, I think, since the 1960s, something like that.
Oh, really?
And I did a book festival at one stage when Sound came out, and a guy stood up, really, I think he was in his late 80s, and he said he said he'd had an early version of that operation, and it was only under local anaesthetic, so he'd heard his hearing coming back. So they attached this little titanium thing or whatever it was at the time, steel, whatever, and literally bang, it was kind of as it happened, which must have been extraordinary.
Amazing,
Wow.
amazing. Well, no, bone conduction is a really important thing. I think that's what Andrew's sort of getting at, and that's also what that guy would have heard is
Yeah.
like all
Well, I
of
mean,
a
I have
sudden
a
making
cousin who's
contact.
deaf, and he used to love just sitting on the speaker. Didn't matter what we were listening to.
Yeah,
We all
yeah,
exactly. We all get it. We all get it. Again, goes back to waves, isn't it? Sound waves.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I love do you know like Imbiras in East Africa? Uh, in the West, they call them what thumb pianos. There's lots of different names for them
Kalimbas or yeah.
in different countries, but they're basically the same instrument where you play, and they're not very loud. And especially in Zimbabwe, where they just make them out of a piece of wood, but then they're supposed to be played inside of a gourd. So you set the whole thing inside this big sort of half of a pumpkin kind of gourd, and the minute it hits that gourd, you're just hearing this funny little ting 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 ting. The minute it hits the gourd, it goes boom, like it's got a subwoofer on it, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, or you know, like just the whole thing with how they test your hearing with tuning forks, you know, the different parts of your
Yeah.
bones for bone conduction. So that's all really important, and I think that's probably all really good ways to supplement, you know, maybe some hearing loss and experiment with it and just stimulation, you know. It's kind of
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah.
Um,
But of course,
hey,
we're
what
not
about
doctors, so what the hell
yeah?
do we know?
Hey, you know, I'm not a doctor, but I got a good one of these, you know. No, I won't go there.
Yeah.
No, don't go
Let's
there.
not get into that.
Here's something. This is on the opposite end from Adam. 'Cause I had to look into it a little bit because I was doing some music for a dance that was going to be for children, of teaching them about the different kinds of cells, living cells, and to figure out some music and how do I get into this? I started looking into sonocytology, which is the actual sound or vibrations that the cells make, and they've started taking, I don't know, some sort of light beam, almost like I guess some type of laser or something, and somehow resting it precisely at a place on the cell, and then that'll act as a kind of a stylus um, to then reproduce
Oh, wow.
audio from that, from a cell. What are they doing with that in space?
I don't know.
If
That's a
anything.
good question. I know that they've done that at CERN, you know, the big particle
Yeah,
smasher.
Yeah, Buck
There's
Winter.
been some audio of that. Oh, I can think of a good example. The discovery of gravitational waves, where two black holes are spinning around each other and then they collide and explode and cause ripples in space-time. That is actually a little chirp sound that you can hear audibly if you pitch shift it down. So that's an interesting example of that.
Oh,
Black
wow,
holes
okay.
colliding hundreds of millions of light years away. And then we made these incredible, not we, but humans made these incredible detectors called LIGO and Virgo, where they can detect this motion, which is about a tenth the width of a proton. So think about that, a very, very, very small vibration. And they can detect that, and you can audibly hear, if you pitch it down, this little chirp as the waves as it spirals in, the waves get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then so you get this sort of real nice wave.
I really do think, over the years, I don't know how it's going to happen, but when they start really figuring out how everything is so connected, like you start, I know there's the whole thing between special and general relativity and trying to find that, how do you fit those?
Yeah, quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's also,
I'm just yeah. Sorry, Andrew.
I was just going to say, I went to a lecture, I'm looking over at my wife, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, talking about its sound waves in stars. And it's that basically all of the turbulence inside stars are pressure waves.
Yeah.
And so by basically putting a microphone up to the star, they can find out what the internal structure of the star is. The same way seismic waves can be looked at by the way they travel through the Earth. It's that same kind of thing, all pressure waves inside stars, which is...
I actually... when you're a grad student, you have to be funded by a research project. And my current project doesn't have funding right now. So I'm doing a summer project, and we are doing seismology in white dwarf stars, exactly what you just said.
There you go. Well, you'll understand a lot more about
pulsations. We're going to be looking at pulsations in white dwarf stars to determine what their cores are made of and how they're structured.
Hey, do you know... Do you know of the author Stephen Alexander?
No.
I think he's a physicist. He wrote a book called The Jazz of Physics, and he teaches physics using his saxophone in the classroom to show about waves and all this. Anyway, I haven't actually read his book. I've seen a couple of videos. It's quite an interesting take on sort of bringing this all together. But what I was going to say about it was, I just do it's like science fiction. Someday they're going to figure out how all this stuff works together and be able to utilize sound in order to transport you from here to Andromeda or something. They'll just, I don't know. It's got to happen someday if we ever can flatten. If we ever flatten the curve, we're going to get there.
Somehow we've converged on this topic of waves. But in fact, if you get into quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, you find that everything, all the particles and all the little photons and everything in the standard model of physics is all waves. It's all certain. It's all vibrations at certain frequencies.
Yeah, but if you look at like the quantum loop gravity stuff, where they start talking about it only goes so far, and once you get down to a certain place, it becomes granular, and you can't get any smart. Now, I just don't believe, that's what they're talking about, that the relationship
the
between
Planck
these.
Scale.
And I don't know. And I just always think that doesn't sound right, because it's always, if there's something, if you have a point and a point here, and they're granular, they're the smallest things. What's that in between them?
Well, one thing to keep in mind think about that is quantum loop gravity is speculative, just like string theory.
I know.
So
I know.
Whereas quantum mechanics and general relativity are very, very well tested. But yes,
Okay.
you're right.
But Planck is a badass. It's he hasn't been disproven any more than Einstein has, I don't think.
Planck is a badass, yeah.
And he says some really cool things.
I love his exercise too.
Santiago Mendez. There are things like vest, haptic things you can wear, made to feel vibrations of sound. There is one called Wooger. Whoa,
Oh,
we got.
cool.
I've got to make a note of that. I got to look up a
Yeah.
Wooger. Oh, Subpack is another. Don't know. I've never heard of that. So that's going in my to-do stack
Buy
there.
list.
Um, Pepe Damien, just an amazing related title by Oliver Sacks. Music Ophelia. Anybody know
Yeah,
that?
I know it. Yeah, it's good.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is. He was sort of studying. I guess I mean a lot of the neurological and emotional impacts of music, and that thing which is a sort of very it's sort of become almost commonplace. You know, that thing of sound being the last sense to go, and being able to draw people back from, well, not draw them back from but states of dementia where it appears that
Yes.
they've kind of gone beyond kind of thing through music or
Yeah. Oh,
sound anyway.
I'll look into that. I love, I've seen lots of videos of that happening with people playing music back with people and with dementia, and it's amazing to watch. I just love it. Here's a question. I guess this is for everybody. Dan Denning, how do you all manage the work-life balance as when something you are so passionate about is also your work? It's very tricky to separate yourself and gain a fresh perspective. Um, well, I'll just do a short answer. Well, that's to me what this whole webinar is about. Like the thing, how I look at what I do in mixing. It's just one thing that I do. It's just a thing that I do. There's lots of other things that I'm interested in. So if that was my only thing, I'd drive myself crazy. So the balance to me comes from talking with people like this in different fields, but who have similar, say, sense of life. Like they're not, completely off the mark with what we want to do. Um, and I think we all pretty much believe in a pretty benevolent universe, so we're interested in it and interested in finding out more about it. And is to follow those things, whether you want to call it a hobby or another thing that you do. I think it's important to have these other things to sort of gauge, maybe that thing that you're really, want to do, like mixing. I love mixing, but I also love photography, and I cross-pollinate between them. I really do. Last thing, and then you guys answer this question. We were talking about how, like, if you see a movie or a picture, something that doesn't necessarily make you mix a certain way. For me, that's a little bit different. I actually do. I might hear a song and think, oh, I really want this to look like a Duanu picture from the 40s, like he's a great street photographer from the 40s, and or a Robert Frank photo, like from America, I'll hear a song and go, that's the feeling. And in my head, I'm kind of mixing in black and white,
And do you have any
you know?
synesthesia?
I don't.
No. So there's no actual visual impact
Well,
from sound.
not without a
But that's the
tablet.
way but it's the way you define things.
Yeah. I mean, that I do think that my drug years actually helped in that regard, because that gives you kind of a synesthesia, and you see it, and it stays with you. Yeah, I think it was a really positive force in my life. Not that I'm advocating anything. I'm just saying it was a positive force in my life. Okay, so anybody else want to chime in on all that? How do you balance? How do you balance the thing that you're passionate? I know you're so passionate about sound. You're a writer, but you're incredibly passionate about sound, and understandably so.
I think the crucial thing is not to manage the balance at all. I mean, there are some bits of my life that I keep physically separate. They take place in a different physical space, But apart from that, no, everything is everything.
All connected, isn't it?
The sound is the books. You know, if I'm cooking, then I'm sort of thinking about the you know, wood or sound books, kind of whatever it happens to be. There's no division. I mean, I think
Yeah.
and you know, whatever it is, 20 something years of self-employment, and the fact that I work a lot of my time at home is you know, there are no boundaries. Forget the boundaries. If it's something, the only thing that I would say is that if it is something that where you do want to keep a physical distance between you and it in order to be able to detach for it and from it and to kind of leave it behind at the end of the day, then you know, do your work in a different place. But writing, mixing, photography, you know, making things, making furniture, thinking up books, you know, quantum mechanics, whatever it is, it's all it's all, there is no division.
Yeah, I think maybe I agree with that. I think that's really really a good way to put it. I think maybe I do know what this Dan might be talking about here a little bit. I might be wrong. I don't know him or where he is at in his career or anything. But I remember having trouble when I was starting out and trying to establish myself and having this focus, you know, this one focus and not being open to other things. It may have come I mean, I did do other things, especially on those tablets I was talking about. It was harder back then when I was trying to get established, trying to learn the craft. So maybe that's the place that he's coming from, trying to find.
It was interesting talking to a lot of the guys who own studios at your sort of previous at the previous Thirsties at the and all of them said we thought we could you know, we could have a home life, a family life, and we could have, you know, the studio where kind of people were kind of doing great things, and then they discovered that, you know, musicians, it doesn't work like that. You know, the musicians kind of leak into your house and they do things, and the nights go on forever, and you want to go on drinking with them, and kind of and then you've got to fix a kind of train connection, and so yeah, I mean, music in particular, I would have thought is just one of those things where everything is too porous. Andrew, do you get that? I mean, do you create?
I understand. I think though, I'm just trying to think of a different way to say it, because I think it is, especially when you're starting out, it's easy to be obsessed and it's easy to say, well, okay, I need to spend another 12 hours on this song because it's not done yet. But if you do, it doesn't have to be 12 hours all in a row. But rather than try and give a strategy for it, I think what it is that when you do something that's creative, there is no separation between work and life, like you're saying. So it isn't as much of having a work-life balance. I think it's the trying to make sure that you're not being too selfish, because if you're completely on your own, then you can be selfish because there's no one else you have to deal with. But the work-life balance, I think he's probably asking about, is the part of the life that involves other people. So family or friends or children or whatever it is. And I think trying to make those be two distinct things is kind of a mistake, because it's okay to be thinking about a mix at dinner, but it's not okay to completely ignore someone who's asking you questions because you're thinking about the mix. So you're always doing both things. And I think maybe I'm a little weird with it, but I can dive in and out of the actual work in seconds. I can sit down, hit play, work for 15 minutes and actually be productive, and then have to go do something else and come back. So I don't have to set up these sort of lengths of time that I'm doing something. So maybe I'm just lucky that I can go back and forth that quickly. But I'm definitely guilty when I was younger of like, no, I got to work, and making making out that the work was more important than the relationship with my family. And it isn't. But it's not to
Yeah.
say, well, how do you prioritize them? They need to just coexist. They need to be the same thing if possible. I don't know if I'm
You know, I
explaining that well, but
I think, yeah, no, I do think it's something that you can try to tell somebody, and like to, maybe, yeah, go, take time. If you're getting too inside it, just stop work and go do something else. How many people are going to do that? Like, I don't think I would have taken that advice. So it's almost something like it's a rite of passage or something. You got to go through that sort of tortured stage. You can hear all of us say what we've been through and try to give you the benefit of our years of doing something, but you're still going to want to like do what you feel, more than think you need to do in that
but
moment.
never,
So
I think basically never feel guilty for stopping what you consider the work to go do something else.
yeah,
Because
we'll
if
try
you
not to feel
can,
guilty.
and that thing is worth doing, then that's exactly what you should be doing. And nobody's coming over to make sure you're putting in a certain number of hours a day. If you're productive and yeah, I'm not saying it well, but I think it's trying to not make those distinctions because the lines are so blurred and stuff changes so quickly, and you can go back and forth. You can ping pong between life and work 60 times in a minute if you're
Mm.
returning an email while the mix is playing in the background, and that's fine. And they're just ways to sort of, it's really more about, I think, managing your own neuroses, which I am full of. I beat myself up about absolutely everything, work and life. So it's learning to just not listen to myself, really.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, here's something else. Supersonics HQ. I don't know what that is, but this is just somebody saying something. Logged in just to say, what an interesting conversation. I mixed an album for an artist called Consensus a few years back. It was made in collaboration with CERN. Definitely an interesting topic called Concerned. I'll have to look that up.
That's cool.
And here's a question for Adam from Joshua Carlson. How much bigger are gradational waves than the
Gravitational waves,
Planck
probably.
scale?
Uh, Let me think about that. Well, the Planck scale is the smallest scale possible in our understanding of the universe. So very, very much bigger. But the gravitational waves don't have a specific length. They have a range of lengths. Whereas the Planck scale is the tiniest scale in our current framework of physics. It's the scale at which physics basically breaks down. So the Planck scale is very, very much smaller. I would think on the order of 30 orders of magnitude, which means 10 with 30 zeros after it, times smaller. So
Right.
it's very, very small, Planck scale.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a distance or length of time because they become space-time becomes it's one thing. It's the smallest distance, that we can break. We keep breaking things down, as Chad was talking about. It gets to a point where we can't. It doesn't make sense in our physical framework to go any smaller.
But
Right.
also, like with the gravitational waves, obviously their wavelengths are big. They travel gigantic distances, but to measure them, the amplitude of them is getting down towards the Planck scale because you're talking about this
Yeah,
distance
even
that's
that is still
it,
like, I don't know, 20 orders of magnitude off the Planck
right.
scale. The Planck scale is crazy small. Nothing to do with daily life whatsoever.
Hmm.
But yeah, detecting gravitational waves was an incredible feat to detect such a small shift in
Right.
space. Because basically the wave ripples space, and the way those detectors work is it's a light beam going back and forth, and as the light goes back and forth, you bounce it back off of a mirror, and the light going out interferes with the light coming back. So again, the waves, you get a destructive interference, just like a phase cancellation. And if you get just the right interference, you can determine the change in distance between your source and the mirror that's reflecting it back.
And I've watched a couple of interviews with the guys when they first switched on LIGO. I mean, it's been off and on because they were upgrading and things, but
Yeah.
they got one the very first night and thought, well, it's got to be broken.
Yeah.
There's no way. Because they had no idea how long they were going to have to wait, but
Yeah.
thought like this must happen a lot. And they got one the first night, which is pretty insane.
Well, after 10 years or so.
Well, when they finally
the first
got
night
it
after,
working.
after the
Yeah.
right fix. Yeah. Took them a long time to get to that point. Yeah.
What do we got here?
Is Jackie actually
it's a
tweeting them all out from the chat? I love that.
Well, some of them. Here's I got one on my phone. She's actually gone to notes now. This is really high tech. I'm feeling quite cool here. Space Hotel music. Going back to the working on multiple mixes over time rather than just one per day or week in isolation. Andrew showed me this was actually valid in one of his other videos when I thought I was just procrastinating. And Chad taught me to be freer with mixing, to rely more on instinct, which I always felt more natural with. No question, just a thanks for the inspiration and have. Oh well, thanks, Space Hotel Music. That's what we hope with this with the seminars and webinars is that we can help a little bit. And the reason for that is there's nobody gets to do. You know, somebody asked me if I watched other engineers on Mix to Masters, and I didn't have an answer. I went, well, I don't actually. And they said, well, why isn't that? And I said, I'm not sure why. And of course, immediately after that, I thought I had the answer right when the webinar was done, and it was just, like yourself and myself, we came up doing that. It was like being at a seminar every day we were at work. We already went through that whole thing for years of being with other engineers in the studio watching what they're doing. So I think that's probably why I don't really, go and watch other engineers now. But
It's kind of a shame that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, it does, and that's what I was getting at, is that the seminars are to me to fill that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I watch tons of those videos, to be honest, and all of yours. You've never put out a video I have not watched.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
That's
Really?
all right. Don't be. Well, I didn't. I bypassed the porn years, but since you've been doing mixing videos.
Well, there's some people that think that those are my best years.
The highlights.
That's a different thing.
Yeah. Santiago, this is our last question, and then
Oh yeah, then we got to get a little tutorial on the survey.
So, are we okay for time, Tudor? I suppose.
We're
we got
5 to 10.
Okay. All right. Santiago Mendez. Another question for Adam. What's the current view of the extended standard model of physics? Is this the prevalent theory still supersymmetry? Oh, well, that you should be able to do that in 2 minutes.
Yeah, no problem. I'm not a particle physicist, so this is not at all my field, but the standard model is still currently the best framework to describe everything that we know about material that exists in the world, particle physics. And supersymmetry, they thought they would find it at CERN or some evidence for it. They have not. So that is sort of waning in popularity. There you go.
Okay.
But
so Andrew,
that's all I know.
Andrew, what's sort of the now the standard model for bands getting a record deal?
Why are you asking me?
Andrew, I would like to know whether that BCM10 gets any use back there. I'm staring at it.
And the crowd went wild. Every once in a while, I got to record something here. So yeah, I record through channel 1.
You're not like summing outside the box.
Oh God, no. The mixing's completely in. But no, every once in a while I do record an overdub. Like I put harmonium on some. That's our thing. Chad and I both put harmonium on other people's records, whether they want.
You can put harmonium on anything. It sounds great.
Yeah. So I'll use it for that. But no, I don't. I tested all that stuff, and nope, I'm 100% inside. Yeah.
And Chad, are you doing some outboard effects?
I've only I've recently gone off. I'm pretty much all into box and have been since 2008 or something. I have during that time, I've got a plug-in in my or a, a patch in the H3000 Ultra Harmonizer that still, you
Another
know, the
one.
one Ultra, Buenos Noches, yeah,
Buenos noches.
through the SRS, and that's never changed. I've always used that. Only I'm on my second round of the H3000 burning out, so I'm off it now. And I don't think I'm going to get it fixed. It just costs too much money to fix those things because they don't make the power supplies anymore, and you have to have them made. I mean,
I'll sell you
it's
one.
ridiculous. Yeah. So, and I'm quite happy. I mean, I do like that particular thing.
Mhm.
Even Thai just don't seem interested at all. I've asked them a million times. They don't seem interested at all in trying to resurrect any of those algorithms that are already digitized in the unit. Why can't they just put them out for the factory plug-in that they have? I don't understand it. I know there's more to it than just going, oh, well, just take them out of the machine and put them in that
Oh,
digital
Chad's been digitized.
form. I know they also do it for Avid and Logic and all that stuff, but still, I mean, they've done it for other things, so why not, you know? And I've asked
Yeah.
nicely, really nicely, and they still haven't done it. I am 100% in the box. If I do something outside the box with a Sans amp or another compressor, I'll just record it back in if I need to, but that's rare. That's pretty rare. Um, okay, so
Sloan Sky
before we
Survey.
get into this, yeah, before we get into this sky surfing thing, does anybody else have a final note that they want to share? There's no more. I don't have any other questions here. Anything else that looks? No, that's all right.
I think I'd just like to say how much I've learnt this evening. I never expected to get it. I mean, my understanding of cosmology has expanded from that to that, which is really,
Right.
really,
That's
which is
good.
pretty good. Which is so, you know, thank you. It's been really good fun. It's been
Yeah. Oh, well,
it's gone
thanks
it's
for being
gone
with.
in very satisfyingly kind of weird directions.
Yeah. Well, we didn't know it was going to happen. You never do, and that's. I mean, I just want it to be like a conversation around a coffee table, with a glass of water.
Have you enjoyed it?
um, yes, this has been great.
Yeah.
Adam, you all right? You gonna?
Yes. Okay. So back to this screen sharing. So the website, I don't know if I can, I know I can paste it in the chat box for these participants here, but I don't know about it going out to the other folks. How about I paste it in and then here, sorry, I think I need to stop sharing. I'll paste it in and then maybe one of the
Yeah,
geniuses can paste it into the
sure. I'll paste it in
YouTube
the
box.
chat. Yeah,
Great.
no problem.
So that takes you to this page of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which is called the Sky Server. And what I'm doing is a radial search, and feel free to take a screenshot of this page or whatever to get these coordinates. I suppose I could put them in as well. The problem with this is you won't get very far if you don't have some coordinates. You can just invent some and you'll look at some portion of the sky, but there might not be anything interesting there. But
But you can get the coordinates from sky surveys and atlases, and they're
yeah, you
usually
can look up any
standard.
object. Like if you look up, any object on Wikipedia, and you get what's called the RA and the DEC, which is right ascension and declination, you can then put them in. And if they are within the coverage of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, you'll be able to see them. It doesn't cover the whole sky. It covers the sky that you can see from Arizona, so northern hemisphere.
Okay.
So then when you click submit, These are a list of objects within that search radius. Again, type 3 is a star, type 6 is a galaxy. Pick one of these other galaxies. Sometimes it picks up, like in this case, it's picking up different parts of this one galaxy and calling it multiple galaxies. So you have to, this is the kind of thing that I deal with. You have to go in and make sure that what it's saying is 3 galaxies is actually 3 separate galaxies and not 3 different sort of what we call knots. These things are knots on one galaxy.
And is it just that those are higher concentrations of stars within the galaxy, or?
That's exactly right. So these spiral arms of a disk galaxy are sort of like traffic pileups on a freeway. And the pileups cause, so galaxies are gas and stars, and the gas is usually hydrogen, mostly hydrogen, and when it condenses and heats up, it forms stars. So what you're seeing in this blue regions are new, hot, big stars that are forming. So these are star forming regions. That's why they're blue. If you look at one of these other galaxies, where's a nice elliptical? There was one up here. There's 2 main types of galaxies, elliptical and spiral. So this is an elliptical galaxy, which has a very different look, as you can see. It does not have those spiral arms, and it's more red and yellow, kind of like the color of the sun. And there is not star formation going on in this galaxy. This is what they call red and dead. So it's not blue stars, it's old red stars. All the blue ones, which are really big and burning hot, they burn out their hydrogen, because it's hydrogen fusing into helium. They burn out their hydrogen within just a few million years. Whereas these old stars and stars like the sun, you notice this is about the color of the sun. Color is based on the temperature. These kind of stars will last about 10 billion years. And the sun is about 5 billion years old and has about 5 billion more to go. So this is an older galaxy, and there isn't any formation going on here. Same here. This is what you call a lenticular, which is in between a spiral and a elliptical. This one has some sort of structure to it. So yeah, any galaxy or any object you like, or even a star, that's a little faint galaxy, but these are probably foreground stars. So the stars you're seeing are stars in the Milky Way. These are in our line of sight when we're looking out. You can click on Explore, and you get some information on that star.
And this should have a very different redshift value then, shouldn't it?
It won't have a redshift because it's not far enough. There isn't enough space between it and us.
Oh, right. Okay.
To have a redshift. But this galaxy will have a redshift. And you can see here its spectrum. So what you're looking at here is basically a graphic equalizer.
Yeah.
This is how much, this is the volume, and this is the frequency or wavelength. So this is the light that we're receiving from the star in sort of spread out in frequency. So down here in 4,000 angstroms, which is about 400 nanometers. So 4 times 10 to the minus 9 meters is the wavelength of this light. There's 50 in whatever units this is, say 50 decibels of that coming in. There's about 170 of this area coming in. And then there's, again, this real specific frequency at, say, 6,600 of this hydrogen alpha line. And that's one that we know really well that we can use to determine, we know it's supposed to be, say, 6623. And if we measure it to be 6615, that means it's been stretched out. So that means it's moving away from us. It's redshifted.
And
what does this mean up at the left here? It says no warnings.
That means no flags. That means it's good data.
Okay.
If it might have like what they call a photometry flag, where it's like maybe there's a really bright star next to it that's giving you lots of light that's contaminating the signal. It's bleed through. It's like the guy didn't shut the door into the guitar room and there's drums in the guitar.
And the red lines below the curve are absorption?
Hey now, those are absorption features,
Just asking.
and the ones above are emission features, exactly. So this is where photons of light have been absorbed by some, what's Mg? Magnesium?
Magnesium?
Yeah, I think magnesium in the atmosphere of that star. So stars have atmospheres just like the sun, and the light comes off the surface of the star, and then it goes through the atmosphere. And that atmosphere contains magnesium because that very specific frequency that corresponds to the electron transfer in magnesium between some of its energy levels has been scooped out. It's been absorbed by that magnesium.
So can I ask another specific geeky question
Please,
then?
yeah.
So how do you separate absorption from the galaxy itself to absorption from gas lanes between us and the galaxy?
Yeah, that type of absorption is called extinction. And you also have that in our atmosphere. There's very specific lines, like it's very interesting, in Arizona, what's it called? There's a city in Arizona that has a lot of telescopes. I can't think of the name of it. And all of the sodium lights in the city are exactly the same brand, the same type. All the night lights in the city have to be the specific sodium light because it has one very specific absorption line. So when you're doing your photometry, you know that there's that one atmospheric line from the city lights, which you can just correct for, and you're done.
So are these
those
correct?
are things that we correct for. These
So
will
are
be
these corrected for dust in the Milky Way that they know they're looking through or not?
Yep, check this out.
Okay.
So if I go back to the galaxy and I click on its page, extinction R, that is the R band, which is the red extinction. So you have to subtract 0.03 from this R due to extinction along the way, intervening dust clouds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got another note from Santiago Mendez. He says that galaxy needs a bit of a Fab Filter Pro Q. It's a plugin, an EQ plugin.
Well, there you go. So we finally did a plug-in question. You know,
All right.
this
Hey,
is awesome.
I think we're out of time. We got to let Tudor and Max, go do their thing.
Yeah, and it's beer
as
o'clock
much as
here
I'd
in
like
the UK.
as much as much as I could go on for another a couple of hours, really. We'll have to do this again, and come back with our notes, like after licking and chewing about all this stuff over some time. Hey, thank you, everybody here,
Thanks for having us.
for doing this.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Bella.
Yeah, we'll try to
thank
set
you.
something up more. I want to thank Tudor and Max and Victor,
Yeah.
and the Mix with the Masters teams for doing all this, helping us out here. And let's we'll just try to schedule these when we can over the lockdown, because that's going to last for another 5-6 years, something like that.
See.
With the way things are going. That's okay. We got this. This isn't too bad.
It's good. It's good.
It
It's
is.
great fun.
It's pretty good. All right.
Awesome.
Nice to see everybody. And
Yeah.
let's talk again
Stay
soon.
safe.
All right.
Yeah. See you soon.
Everybody be
so much.
safe. Yeah.
Take
All
care.
right. Yeah. See ya.